I do want to ask your help. Can you think of a word that's really positive, one word? And on the count of three, can you scream it out really loud? Is my microphone working?
Yeah, that one is.
Okay. So, think. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. I was quite curious because it's a theater. It's not really designed to hear the audience, perhaps. So I wondered how the sound would be different. And for me, I work with people, and it's quite difficult to start the talk, get too nervous if I don't know who you are. So on that note, how many of you consider yourself as a designer? So I go through a lot of airports, and I usually write my job as a designer in the immigration form, and I get different kind of reactions. And last week I was in Heathrow, and the immigration officer asked me, "So what do you actually do?" And I said, "Well, I design how people use the phone." And he looked really disappointed, and he said, "Boring." And I wanted to get a stamp and go ahead, but I asked him why. And he said, it's not as exciting as designing the phone itself. So he, the non-designer, thinks that designers do product design. And of course, it's easier to explain what you do if you do design something beautiful and visible. But we all know in the circles of designers that designers do more than designing what's visible, which was quite obvious this morning and yesterday. And on that note, I want to talk about what designers can do for people, which I typically frame in this context as 3D design. And design is always about change. Whatever we design is involved with something that changes something that we used to do. And take music, for instance. If you're late 30s or above, like myself, you probably have gone through many medium how we listen to music. During those transitions, we also saw a lot of transitional products. So as an example, record player and CD player in one. Quite beautiful, isn't it? We had all these records, so what were we supposed to do? So companies thought about how to allow people to use their records. Second image is the MP3 player, quite old one, with a hard drive inside, and it looks exactly like and sized exactly like a CD player. I assume the designers probably had thought about making it similar to CD player so that it's appealed to people who are used to that size. And the third one, which is my favorite, and you can still buy it online, the cassette tape-shaped MP3 player adapter. So if your car had a cassette tape deck, but now all your music is digitalized, or you bought a CD player, you can connect it to your car so that you can still use your car stereo with it. So these transitional products really mark the era of moving from one technology to another. But of course, we do have designs that are purely playing on changing the experience of using it. So like this Muji CD player, it has a switch, so you pull the string to play or stop the music. And it does bring the nostalgia of this ventilation fan that every household had in Japan. And these products really incur the emotional reactions from us through association. And weak as we are as human beings, we buy this product and justify it by saying that, well, it brings smiles on my face every time I use it. So unless you're very strict with clutter, I'm sure you have some of these products at home which may not, or may be, or may not be used. What's difficult these days is that it may increase the clutter or the landfill in the world, but it's a necessary evil because these transitional products allow you to maximize resources that you had available at that time. And the difficult part of this era is that we don't know how long a technology product will last. Like the speaker on the right side, it's designed for a specific product. So if that standard goes away, what will you do with that product? We don't simply know. So it's obvious that design is a change agent, and but there is always constant tension between the old and the new behavior, because we are, at least in the technology term, we are not really inventing any new behavior. We are actually trying to change existing behavior. The way you do it is probably changing, not necessarily the motivation behind it. And there is a reason that drives companies to hire people like myself, specializing in design research. And I lived and moved around with a specific purpose of learning about new culture. And when I was younger, even boyfriend from different cultures. And people's reactions and motivations towards new technology may vary a lot, but underlying motivations ultimately is very similar. But the difference comes from the fact that how people's environments and social contexts are different around the world. So take these two girls as an example. So Sneha is I met her in Mumbai, and she wants to be a model, and she uses a fairness cream, as that's how it's called in India, to whiten her skin tone. And because that's one of the most important criteria to perceive someone as beautiful. Monica, on the other hand, living in Rio, they're both 18 years old, by the way, and she spends any time when she has available to go on the roof and get tanned, because she wants to have tan line. And she thinks that, she explains to us that if you don't have tan line, you're too poor to go outside and enjoy the sun, because you have to work all the time. So if you are in the business of selling the tanning oil or fairness cream to these girls, it's an important understanding. I brought this example. I don't believe anyone here is in that business, but I brought this example to show how the basic motivation of looking better according to the social norm shows itself in a very different course of action. And this really exemplifies why design research does exist, especially for products created for the global market but sold very locally. You may say that there are some challenges in understanding people because we're so many of us, about 7 billion, and finding the right people could be a challenge. We all have limited imagination. So if you ask me today, or if I asked you today, what's your opinion on the design of the seat of the space travel station? I don't really have that much to offer. We all also change mind when we say that, oh, I think this is blah, 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 this is my opinion. But when we actually go outside in the real world, not when we are talking to the researchers, we definitely may change our mind because our opinions are not really fixed in stone. So the methods and techniques of understanding people and their environment have been developed really well over the past decade, and I started to see more companies offering services to co-create with people, consumers, including some excellent ones based in Holland as well. But the most significant change over this development is perhaps the attitude of companies in terms of how they see the value of using the insights from selling the product to creation of the product. And on that regard, perhaps it's more difficult to make good use of the insights for such companies rather than listening just well to the consumers. So I brought one example as well. I guess that's the new standard of the second day. When I was in India, I was leading a research center in Bangalore. So my team was faced with a unique challenge of mobile text input. And Bangalore is a very metropolitan city. They say, because of people all over from different parts of India, and they say there's about less than 30% of population originally coming from Bangalore. Here's a short video clip to explain that problem.
My mother tongue is Tamil. Apart from Tamil, I've had the opportunity to learn speaking in English, Kannada and Hindi.
பட் வந்து தமிழ்நாட்டில் பிறந்தனால தமிழ் கன்னடா ரெண்டும் மிக்ஸு.
I speak to my parents in Tamil and my in-laws in Marathi, and he speak to me in English and I speak to him in Marathi.
ಡ್ಯೂಟಿ ಟೈಮ್ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಸೊ ಕನ್ನಡ ಮತ್ತು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಎರಡು ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹಿಂದಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ರೆ ಹಿಂದಿ ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಹಿಂದಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಹಿಂದಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
இங்கிலீஷ் வந்து ஃபுல் போகணுன்னா இப்போ வெளிநாடு, தமிழ்நாடு, கர்நாடகா எல்லா இடத்துக்கும் போகணுன்னா இங்கிலீஷ் ஃபஸ்ட்டு தெரியணும். அதுக்கப்புறம் நம்ம பாஷை வந்து தமிழ்நாடு, அது எப்படியா இருந்தாலும் தமிழ் வந்துடும், தமிழ் கன்னடா இதெல்லாம் வந்துடும், ஹிந்தி.
Tamil has been my mother tongue, so and in my family everyone apart from me is literate in Tamil and they use Tamil as the medium of communication at home.
But I cannot write Tamil very fluently because I've never practiced it. I can speak Tamil fluently. My mom, when she SMSs me, which is not very often, but she does SMS once in a while. She does that. She tries to write Tamil in English, and I guess when I respond back, I do that as well.
Do you use your phone to write messages, send SMS?
No, I don't use it.
Only to make phone call?
Speak only. ಅನುಕೂಲ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷು ಇದಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಗ್ರಾಮರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಿಸ್ಟೇಕ್ಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಭಯಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ.
ನಾನು ಇವಾಗಲೂ ಕನ್ನಡ ಮೆಸೇಜನ್ನು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೆದು ಕಳಿಸ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದರೆ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಬರೀಬೋದು. ಅದು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ಬರೀಬೇಕು ಅಂದಾಗ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗೋದು ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಬರೆಯೋಕೆ ಏನೋ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋದಾದರೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೇ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯದಾಗ್ತಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ.
So to summarize, so there are 1.2 billion people in India, and I don't think there is any accurate statistics, but more than 122. I think Rajesh showed much higher number yesterday, spoken languages, and 22 official languages in each state, basically. There's no accurate statistics. We estimate about 10% of the population would probably be able to communicate in English, read and write. The issue here is that there is a broadening digital divide when it comes to written language associated using computers because of the text input. So most people who are educated, who can speak English, use English, so they don't really feel the need. People who are less educated, who cannot use English, don't do because it's too difficult to use. So let me just explain a little bit on what makes it so difficult. So in Indian languages, scripts are very sophisticated and have very different writing logic. So when alphabets are combined, they change the form, essentially. So if you think about how you learn to write, so the handwriting, if you look at the result of the combination, is not necessarily linked directly to how the alphabets are combined or should be combined through the digital tools. So there is a big difference between handwriting and typing on digital tools. And furthermore, a lot of text input systems, so on the top it's showing the in-script keypad layout, which is a government standard format over QWERTY keypad. And on the bottom, it's commercially available solutions on a normal mobile phone. So these keyboards, as you can see, there are more than 50 alphabets and thousands of combinations possible. So the keypad, which is coming from English culture, is getting very crowded. So basically, in a nutshell, the problem is that people don't use it, period. And that's what we observed very easily when I arrived in India So I wanted to actually understand a little bit better. So we asked people to write their alphabetic table. So I mean, here, I'm sure no one will fail here to write A, B, C, D, E, the English alphabetic table. So we had people, minimum education of 12 years up to PhD degree, and we asked them to write the alphabetic table in the order that they learned. Only 37% were able to complete, and in the photo, he's kind of struggling to find the kind of missing pieces. He knows there's something missing, but he couldn't quite fill it in. And none of them really regularly used a native text input, and it meant that majority of population possibly were not familiar with a native language text input. And as a company, you could think about two directions. Obviously, ignore it, because you can argue that we have lived so far, no one else is doing it, and English literacy is on the rise, especially for the young people. Or invest in a good solution. Obviously, there is a digital divide, and it's a good thing to do. But as a research team, of course, we wanted to propose or find if there is any better solution than what we already have in the market. So and we did find some good solutions coming from small companies, and there is a service called Quillpad. So this is called transliteration. So you type in the sound of your language in English alphabet, and the computer will automatically find the matching local language for it. And second solution on the right side is called Panini, and it's based on statistical prediction, so that if you type the first character, it will show you the probable next character that you have to type. One issue here is that transliteration solution, you have to know English, once again. And the prediction solution, if you're not confident or familiar with the grammar or the writing order, again, that really gives us a challenge of how much learning curve people will need to get used to it. And let me pause a little here. So in our path that followed looking for the better design solution, we experienced some of the loopholes that ambush you in bringing something new to the market. And one is, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this quote from Henry Ford. There are several factors to consider in deciding on design direction, especially when it comes to text input. We had a clear in our mind that we need a solution for people who do not know English, which is a majority of the population, or are not really knowledgeable enough to use the local language on our digital tool. And also, it will be really a plus if we find a solution that people become more literate by using the solution. However, it's a type of decision that if we ask people, so what do you want? You don't use text, you don't use internet, what do you really want? It may not be the solution that people wanted. So as an example, and this is quite an extreme example, this is an ideal mobile phone from a chai shop worker in a slum in Mumbai. And he said he wanted to have a phone that works also as a pen, so that it will encourage people to write more, so that people become more literate. I mean, we could have taken this solution literally, but I mean, definitely we need to read between the line what the user is saying. A second example, again, this is example from Liberian refugee camp in Ghana. And his ideal mobile phone included a function of a translator. And obviously, tribal language issues also exist in Africa, and he wanted to have a translator function in the mobile phone so that he can communicate with people from other tribes, other countries. The reality here is that voice recognition of most of the non-major languages don't have any solutions, and because of the diversity that exists in the accent, it will require a lot of investment. So the next loophole that I would like to mention is a tunnel vision. And working very hard on your project, especially in the research team, I'm sure it's the same in the design teams, sometimes make you blinded by it and inflate the importance of it. So in 2010, we launched a product in the market called C3, and it sold really well. But we started to hear some complaints about the Hindi version of the keypad that was launched in the market. And the product was QWERTY product, and of course we tried to include the in-script keyboard, the government standard QWERTY Hindi input with the product. And so the complaints were that the keys are so small that if I try to type, it's really difficult to locate the key that I want. The second complaint, which was a bit more surprising, is that people just don't want to show that they need Hindi. Because people who are buying these products wanted to actually show that they can actually write English. And the fact that having a Hindi keypad or print on the device didn't really match the aspiration people had towards the product. So we actually ended up recalling all the product, remove all the Hindi keymat, and replaced it with just English. And I did read some of the posters that I developed a mobile phone for illiterate people. And it's something that I probably would never do. Because if you were, I know you have all limited imaginations, but if you were illiterate, would you like to buy a phone branded as an phone for illiterate people? That's a very important lesson that we need to keep in mind. People have aspirations, not just a tool. And the other one is the aspect of 3D design. I coined this term since working on some projects in India. And that 3D is dirty, difficult, and demeaning. I interviewed quite a few designers in India, and when I asked them, what are you interested in doing here if you joined the team? And they dreamt really high, like augmented reality, sensor technology, or some very humanitarian mission like solving the problems of rural India. And I do respect that high dream. But on the other hand, my mother was a full-time housewife, and she always told us that it's very difficult to appreciate the everyday housework until it stops. And it is true that in the design world, that it's easier to recognize and praise the person who designed this high-rise landmark building rather than designing something that is not visible. Or something that people don't necessarily appreciate, like a trash can on the street. So the text input work was quite difficult, sometimes demeaning to say the least. When I talked to my friends around the world and they asked me, oh, what are you working on? I was like, text input. And they were like, oh, that's not very exciting. It was considered boring, and it will not probably excite the editors of Engadget or Wired, for sure. But thankfully, my team kept their morale high because we selected 11 major languages in India to work with to develop the actual content that goes with it, which would cover about more than 60–70% of the population. And we approached it, I wouldn't go too deep into the design details. We approached it with a familiarity so that people, when they first look at it, they know what it is and they know where to find it. It's not probably the smartest design, but we're not trying to aim at the best performance, but our aim is really to lowering the barrier of embarrassment or discouragement in starting to use the alphabetic system. And we did get the feedback from especially parents saying that, well, the fact that it's in the touchscreen mobile phone will excite the kids, and the fact that it's mimicking the alphabetic table and give you the recommendation, by over time they will probably learn it better, because they don't really have time to sit down with their kids who's going to English medium schools to get to know how to type in their local language. We ran quite a lot of tests and also different levels of literacy so that this layout works with various types of consumers. And also we did gather people who are more using the language more formally, like translators, priests, the script writers, or language teachers. Once the vision was set, of course, getting the input from people was quite lucrative and straightforward. We also considered another factor that we recognized that we could not possibly cover and develop all the language content for numerous variants and dialects. So we designed reasonable layout, one layout that can accommodate most of the Dravidian and Devanagari language families in India. So basically, by design, if someone took the Excel file for the language content, they could actually create a version that's suitable for their own language very easily. Oh, sorry, I was talking. So this on the left, it's Malayalam, and on the right, it's Tamil, which is a completely different language group, but it reasonably works well. So this shows the number of speakers in the world of the language, and the language that I highlight in blue are the language that we developed. There are quite a lot of users, and I think the English and Punjabi, the total speakers statistics probably don't exist because it's really difficult to count. And on the right, this is the languages of 1 million top web pages on the content. And obviously, there is a big difference. So they do say that there are about 6,000 languages around the world. And by 2050, it will be less than half of this. This is a linguist talk, and they say languages are disappearing faster than endangered mammals and 4 times endangered birds. So if this trend continues, they do warn that we'll end up using maybe a few dozen of languages around the world. And to think back, we don't actually know whether our solution will make a difference or lead to the meaningful change, but it's easier to keep up our hope and seeing more about Indian text users with it than without it. And my summary comes back to designer. In my book, there are different types of designers. One is inventor, full of ideas. Craftsman, definite skills to offer and creating new things, or creating more beautiful things. And there's a connector. You may think that what the hell is South Korean women doing in talking about Indian text input? And I think I was a connector. I am still illiterate in any of the Indian languages, but I understand the logic. And my role was to really make people see the alternative future and convince them to invest in it. It's very easy to dismiss any idea that I honestly often get questions, how much more product can we sell if we have this feature? We don't know. SMS as a technology took more than 10 to 15 years to get adopted by the mass. And text tools like this, we don't necessarily know the consequences. So it is a lot of convincing on a human scale, and you have to have a good argument. So if this conference topic was what money cannot do, I would have brought the same topic. And I do have a warm memory of that cassette player adapter to help people managing that transition. And I would say that, yeah, however trivial your design may look, or however other people say that your work is not that exciting, I think what keeps us up is that we believe that it will cause a positive change. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So this was a great presentation, and I have seen a lot of fantastic work from Nokia research through the years at other design conferences, and of course Nokia is not doing so well. Are you not doing so well because you are too concerned about the user?
Well, I think that's why I actually mentioned really briefly that it's not necessarily about listening well to the consumers and have an interpretational solution. We do have a lot of great ideas. There are other factors to make a market success, such as an organizational management.
So could it be that design is not in the company far enough that maybe all the good designers are in the research department, not enough?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, that's why I actually wanted to stress the role of connector. It's not enough that you have good designs. It's not enough that you have good skills. It's not enough that you have created an idea or solutions. It has to be, after all, integrated to the mothership. And the motivation or aspiration of people buying the product is not necessarily about your design or every part of your design or product is good. It's also about other factors. And that's why I actually recently moved to marketing department.
Okay, so now this is a good follow-up. I noticed that at least in the US, the new Nokia phone has something that says the smartphone beta test is over. And in a way, that's like saying that the phones that we have used until now are, as you started the presentation, they are interim products. They are products that go in between. Do you see the future of those phones being much further ahead than what we can imagine? As you say, we don't have enough imagination to know what our phones can do in the future.
I think phones are a slightly different animal than any other technology products because people do have a lot of say in what they want, especially with the, nowadays, phones are not really a phone. Phones can do anything. I don't know. That's my honest answer.
Okay, that's a good way to end this. But definitely it seems that the user has more of a say when it comes to a product that they use every day than they would with other things. So thank you.
Well, thank you.